Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our coverage of the latest mission from Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. I'm Will Robinson-Smith. I'll be providing our coverage. I'll be providing the commentary for the duration of this coverage. We're broadcasting from the Spaceflight Now News Bureau here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. Joined this afternoon by Stephen Young, who's running the technical aspects of our show. Our Adam Bernstein, out in the field, manning the tracking cameras, doing some still photography. And our other photographer, Michael Kane, doing some still photography as well. At the center of your screen, bouncing around a little bit because of the wind, which we'll come back to in a moment, taking a look at a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket there at the heart of Space Launch Complex 40, otherwise known as Slick 40. In T-minus 1 hour, 48 minutes, and 48 seconds and counting, SpaceX will attempt to launch a mission for Luxembourg-based satellite communications company SES. This will be the third mission launching their O3b mPOWER constellation satellites. SpaceX has an 89-minute window that opens up this afternoon at 4:08 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. For our viewers joining from around the world, that's 21:08 UTC. As of now, indications are that SpaceX is targeting the opening of the window for liftoff, but if they haven't started fueling, they can slide further back in that. If you'd like to help support our coverage of the space program, there's a quick and easy way to do that. If you hit the like button, share the stream, and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. And be sure to ring the notification bell so you get alerted whenever we do go live or post new videos here on the channel. Naturally, we can't do these broadcasts without all of you wonderful folks watching from home, as well as our fabulous channel members. Channel membership comes with perks like access to the member-only videos. For those of you who want to watch this and other Cape-based launches in 4K, as an advantage that our channel members have, as well as discounts at our online shop. That's shop.spaceflightnow.com. And if you want to join in on the conversation about this mission or any of the other space activities that are going on, love to bring you into the conversation using the YouTube Super Chat feature. If your question or comment is appropriate to be read on the show, I'd love to bring you into the chat. We're now T-minus 58 minutes, 39 seconds and counting. Assuming SpaceX is targeting the start of this launch window, we're about 20 minutes away from the point at which the launch director would give their go for the start of propellant load for this afternoon's liftoff. For those who may not have joined us on a recent launch, SpaceX not providing mission audio for the full mission. Because this is a customer mission, though, mission audio we're expecting should be available about 15 minutes before liftoff. We do have extensive experience covering SpaceX and Falcon 9 missions, so we will guide you through this count and talk about some of the visual cues that we're watching for to let us know things are likely on track. SpaceX is running the countdown for this mission from its Hangar X site at the Kennedy Space Center. It's at the facility where they refurbish Falcon boosters and prepare them for future flights. In fact, just earlier this afternoon, our Adam Bernstein spotted one of those Falcon boosters cruising past the Vehicle Assembly Building, the VAB, on its way to Hangar X for refurbishment after it was brought into Port Canaveral atop one of SpaceX's drone ships. An increasingly common sight here, seeing boosters coming and going. SpaceX also has support for this launch, and support in part from its control room at their headquarters in Hawthorne, California. Again, this afternoon's launch is targeting, we believe, liftoff at the start of an 89-minute window that opens up at 4:08 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 21:08 UTC. If needed, SpaceX does have a 24-hour backup opportunity tomorrow starting at the same time. Speaking of our super chat feature, joined again this afternoon by Mel Roberts Harold, one of our launch regulars. Good afternoon to you, Mel. Says, so glad to have y'all there, bringing these opportunities to so many to watch, listen, and to learn. Well, we are more than happy to do so on this, well, I would say a fine Sunday afternoon, but it's not exactly what you would call a Chamber of Commerce type of day. But we are hoping that somewhere in the cloud cover, SpaceX is able to find a piece of opportunity here in their 89-minute window. And we'll keep you in the loop for when that happens. As I was just mentioning with the weather here, taking a look at the wider view, you see clouds, clouds and more clouds. This has been sort of the status quo for here on the Atlantic side of Florida today. Coming into this afternoon's launch attempt, the 45th Weather Squadron forecast about 70% favorable weather for liftoff during this window, with the main concern being the cumulus clouds hanging around. If they do, for whatever reason, need to pivot to tomorrow's backup launch opportunity, though, the weather does dip in quality, which would slide to only 40% favorable for launch conditions, with both cumulus clouds and liftoff winds being points of concern. Again, that being for the 24-hour turnaround. In that scenario, they're also looking at the booster recovery weather, which for today's launch attempt stands at low as far as their scale of concern. Tomorrow, it would slide up to low to moderate. T-minus 52 minutes, 16 seconds and counting. Have heard word from SpaceX saying that they are less than an hour until the launch of the O3b mPOWER 5 and 6 launch. So an indication that they are still likely targeting the start of this window, and things are proceeding nominally as best we know them right now. In just a moment, we'll get into the launch countdown timeline, but just to note, the start of this process here come at T-minus 38 minutes Just when the launch director would give the call on the start of fueling, which would begin just a few minutes after that at T-minus 35 minutes, where they would load the rocket grade kerosene, or RP1, onto both the first and second stages, as well as liquid oxygen onto the first stage. As I mentioned, some of the launch photography from both Michael Caine and Adam Bernstein. If you're not already following them on X, here are their handles to do so. They'll have some great photos from today's liftoff, as well as many others coming down the pike, as we do have still quite a few launches left on the calendar for 2023. Now T-minus 50 minutes, 16 seconds and counting. Go ahead and go through that timeline since I've already started alluding to it. Here are those first three items that I mentioned as far as the pull for propellant loading as well as the start of fueling. That's followed up at T-minus 16 minutes when LOX starts flowing onto the second stage of the vehicle. Before that, about T-minus 20 minutes, 20 seconds, we'll see the so-called big vent from the Strongback there. It's a sign that the feed lines are being chilled and a good visual indication that fueling is in fact underway. Again, because this is a customer mission, about a minute after that, we should start hearing mission audio from SpaceX. So as soon as that's available, we'll be able to pipe that in and include that in the broadcast. So if you hear me pause so that you can listen in, and we're obviously listening for the call outs as well, try not to cross the streams here if we want to pull a Ghostbusters reference. Make sure that we all hear the major call outs as they happen. T-minus 7 minutes, the chill down of the 9 Merlin engines will get underway. It involves flowing a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and the turbo pumps, and it protects the engines from the risk of thermal shock and damage during the startup sequence. About 6 minutes out, the first stage kerosene tank should be full. Then at T-minus 4.5 minutes, we'll see the Strongback Retract sequence begin from the Falcon 9 rocket. After the clamp arms open up around the payload fairings, the transport erector, or the Strongback, will lean back about 1.5 degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket, and it will stay in that position until liftoff, when it pulls back much more quickly. T-minus 2 minutes, liquid oxygen loading should be complete, at which point the Falcon 9 will be fully fueled with 1 million pounds of propellant. In the final 60 seconds, control of the countdown will be handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers. The propellant tanks will be brought up to flight pressure. The SpaceX launch director will give their final go for liftoff about 45 seconds out. The engine ignition command will be issued at T-minus 3 seconds. And then, of course, if all 9 Merlin engines are healthy and ignite, the flight computer will give the command for the hold down clamps to release that bird at T0. Again, we believe that T0 point is coming at the start of the launch window, coming up here at 4:08, T-minus 47 minutes, 30 seconds and counting. T-minus 46 minutes, 46 seconds and counting, less than 10 minutes away from the point at which the launch director will give that call on the start of propellant load. So we're keeping an eye out for that. In the meantime, let's go ahead and talk about the trajectory for this mission. Unlike the Starlinks of late that we've seen that are flying in a southeaster trajectory, this one pretty much going due east. Of course, lifting off from the pad here at Space Launch Complex 40 over at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. As I mentioned, it will fly in an easterly trajectory out over the Atlantic. Following stage separation, the first stage, booster 1076, will be landing on one of SpaceX's 3 drone ships. On deck tonight is A Shortfall of Gravitas. The upper stage will continue on with the 2 satellites for SES. There are going to be a few burns on that upper stage engine before the satellites are deployed. Bit of a longer mission than some of the ones we've seen as of late, with deployment coming up starting just about the 2-hour mark into this flight. Of course, SpaceX also going to be recovering the fairing halves that are currently encapsulating the 2 satellites atop the Falcon 9 rocket. They'll be brought back to Port Canaveral, like the booster, where they will be refurbished and turned around for another flight down the road. Now T-minus 40 minutes, 38 seconds and counting. Just a couple minutes away from when the launch director would make the call on the start of propellant load. Before you take a quick peek at the mission stats, that'll be true for the end of this mission. Do want to thank one of our channel members, Rick Donner, for a $10 super chat. Really appreciate that, Rick. Says hello and great to see you as always. Great to see you back here as well, Rick. Thanks for the support. Taking a look at where things will land as soon as this mission is done. This will be the 79th launch of this particular booster, tail number 1076. We'll go over its launch history in just a few minutes. This will be the 273rd Falcon 9 launch to date, the 79th Falcon 9 launch of 2023, the 217th Falcon booster reflight, or the launch of a booster that has flown at least once. This will be SpaceX's 83rd orbital launch of 2023, the 92nd Falcon 9 launch in the last 365 days. This will be launch number 154 from this particular pad, Slick 40 over at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, the 209th overall launch from Pad 40, and of course, the 63rd orbital launch from Florida this year, counting both liftoffs from here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center as well as Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. Now less than a minute away from the point that they'd be making a call on the start of fueling. 3 minutes after that is when the fueling would actually begin. Of course, keeping a close eye on the weather, and while it is still fairly cloudy, it appears, just taking a peek out the window, that the clouds over the launch pads themselves do seem to be thinning out just a bit since we got out here a few hours ago. So hopefully, as far as a launch criteria item, the clouds are becoming less problematic for those tracking the weather as a constraint. But you can see here, just taking a quick look at the countdown clock at the press site and the American flag beside it. Still quite breezy out here. Although the 45th Weather Squadron did not list liftoff winds as a launch weather item. Certainly that is always something that they factor in when it comes down to launch day itself. Now T-minus 36 minutes, 39 seconds and counting. About a minute and a half away from the start of propellant load, if in fact the green light for that has been given. As we await confirmation of propellant load starting, let's go ahead and take a look at what the launch timeline looks like for this mission. A bit different than your typical Starlink launch. T plus 1 minute 12 seconds. The Falcon 9 rocket will pass through max Q, or the maximum aerodynamic pressure, the point of greatest stress on the vehicle as it descends. T plus 2 minutes 27 seconds. The 9 Merlin engines will cease firing. That's first stage of main engine cutoff, or MECO. At T plus 2 minutes 31 seconds, the first and second stages will separate, followed by second stage engine ignition, or SES1, at T plus 2 minutes 38 seconds. At T plus 3 minutes 19 seconds, those payload fairings will jettison. That'll expose the two SES satellites to the vacuum of space for the first time. Then at T plus 6 minutes 34 seconds, the first stage entry burn will begin. That'll last 23 seconds. At T plus 7 minutes 51 seconds, the second stage engine will cease firing, SECO-1. At T plus 8 minutes 19 seconds, the first stage landing burn will start. It'll conclude with landing out on the drone ship, A Shortfall of Gravitas, at T plus 8 minutes and 43 seconds. Then at T plus 26 minutes 57 seconds, the Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage will fire for a second time, that burn lasting 33 seconds. It'll burn for its third and final time pre-satellite deployment at T plus 1 hour, 56 minutes, 46 seconds. That burn will last a total of 30 seconds. And then we get to satellite deployment. The first one being released at T plus 2 hours and 18 seconds. The second satellite departing the Falcon 9 upper stage at T plus 2 hours, 7 minutes, and 18 seconds. So again, a bit of a longer timeline on this mission than those of us who've been watching quite a number of the Starlink missions are used to seeing. And potentially like the Transporter 9 small sat rideshare mission that we saw from Vandenberg yesterday, there's a chance that SpaceX may stay with this mission and continue to provide telemetry data and onboard camera views through payload deployment. So, assuming that that is the case, we'll of course keep an eye on that and let you know if that's something that we are in fact able to stay with and bring to you here live at Spaceflight Now. Now T minus 33 minutes, 20 seconds and counting. Assuming that fueling is already underway, we should start to see signs of that fairly soon, as both liquid oxygen as well as RP1, or rocket grade kerosene, would be loaded onto the vehicle. If you take a look at the bottom of the Falcon 9 rocket, where the darker black section meets the lighter gray area, should start to see a bit of a vapor ring form around that area if fueling in fact is underway in the next minute or two here. We have not heard word confirming that fueling is underway from SpaceX, so we're keeping a weather eye on those visual cues to suggest that fueling has started. Of course, when we do hear word from SpaceX, we'll be sure to pass that along to you straight away. Now T minus 31 minutes, 48 seconds and counting, are starting to see that vapor ring I mentioned forming along the base of the Falcon 9 rocket. So with fueling underway, they are committing to starting, or to launching the vehicle, appears at the start of the window. T-minus 29 minutes, 22 seconds and counting. At this point, helium loading is now underway onto the pressure vessels on the first stage. Helium is important because it's used to pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight. As we've mentioned, this is a mission for the Luxembourg-based company providing satellite internet service called SES. This is the launch of the third pair of the O3b mPOWER 5 and 6 satellites. Be curious what those look like. This is an image of them taken before the payloads were encapsulated into the payload fairings. The satellites were encapsulated into the payload fairings, I should say. This photo taken inside a clean room before they were brought together and prepared for flight, as you see them currently in the live picture there on the right-hand side of your screen. If you'd like to read more about this mission, we do have an article up on our website, spaceflightnow.com. SES trying to make up for a little bit of some challenges that they had with their first 4 satellites, as they were not operating as fully intended. These satellites, built by Boeing on behalf of SES, they've taken the time to start to make some upgrades, which will be fully rolled into their next several satellites, starting with Satellite 7. They had an important deadline, though, to meet by launching these 2 that you see here on your screen by the end of the year, in order to help clear out the C-band for the Federal Communications Commission, allowing 5G mobile providers to have full access to that C-band. And by doing so, they got $3 billion pre-tax. So, an important mission to launch before the end of 2023, getting these 2 satellites off the ground, which they are currently on target to do, of course, with a launch today. SES also looking to add 2 additional satellites beyond the original 11 that they had contracted with Boeing. So satellites 12 and 13 were added a little bit later on in the game. The next launch of these O3b mPOWER satellites is targeting the latter half of 2024. Satellites 9, 10, and 11 are expected to launch in 2025, and satellites 12 and 13 would head up in 2026. A T-minus 25 minutes, 50 seconds and counting. In just about a minute, cryogenic helium will be loaded onto the storage tanks of the second stage of the Falcon 9. T-minus 23 minutes, 47 seconds and counting. Do appreciate the more than 2,700 folks who are joining us live this afternoon. If you haven't already, a great way to help support our coverage and allow more people to find this live stream is quick and easy, just by hitting the like button, sharing the stream as well. Now T-minus 23 minutes, 10 seconds and counting. Before we hit the point of the big vent, let's go ahead and run through this vehicle for those that maybe aren't quite as familiar or want a bit of a refresh on the Falcon 9. It stands 70 meters or 229 feet tall with a diameter of 3.66 meters or 12 feet. Most of that is made up by the first stage, the bottom 2/3 of the rocket. This one in particular has flown 8 times before, going for flight number 9 today. This is tail number 1076 in the SpaceX fleet. At the base of the first stage are the 9 Merlin engines you see on the image on the right-hand side of your screen. They burn rocket-grade kerosene and liquid oxygen to produce 1.7 million pounds of thrust. Around the engine compartment are the black carbon fiber landing legs that are used to land the first stage on the drone ship. Again, today they're using A Shortfall of Gravitas. Above the first stage is the interstage. It's a composite structure consisting of an aluminum honeycomb core surrounded by carbon fiber. In the inset image on the right-hand side of your screen, you see those deployable hypersonic grid fins. These are titanium winglets that provide stability and steering as the Falcon 9 comes back through the atmosphere like a big old dart heading toward that drone ship. At the top of the interstage are 3 mechanical latches that attach to the second stage. The first stage main engine cutoff, high-pressure helium is used to release those latches, and 4 pneumatic pushers ensure a clean separation. Second stage engine nozzle is also safely housed inside the interstage adapter until stage separation. That second stage, powered by a single Merlin vacuum engine, also called MVAC engine. It's equipped with a large nozzle optimized for burns in the vacuum of space. It provides more than 200,000 pounds of thrust. It'll be fired 3 times today before the deployment of the 2 satellites for SES. The MVAC engine burns the same propellant mix as the first stage, that being liquid oxygen and RP1. It will ignite a 4th time after the deployment of the satellites for SES for a deorbit burn, driving the upper stage back into the atmosphere where it will burn up. It eliminates the risk of creating unnecessary debris on this mission. Finally, up top, the payload fairings that house the O3b mPOWER satellites 5 and 6, made up of carbon composite material that is 13.1 meters or 43 feet tall, 5.2 meters or 17.1 feet in diameter. See here on your screen the start of the big vent getting underway. Preparing for liquid oxygen loading onto the second stage coming up in just about 4 minutes from now. Rounding out information on the payload fairings, as I mentioned earlier, these 2 will be recovered a little bit further downrange from where the first stage lands on the drone ship. They splash down under parachutes, and they'll be brought back to Port Canaveral for refurbishment. A T-minus 19 minutes, 42 seconds and counting. Now T minus 16 minutes, 16 seconds and counting. The big vent has wrapped up in about 10 seconds. Liquid oxygen will start flowing onto the second stage of the Falcon 9. Now T minus 12 minutes, 47 seconds and counting. The next big milestone coming up is at T minus 7 minutes when the engine chill down sequence begins by flowing a small amount of liquid oxygen through the Merlin engine turbo pumps to cool them ahead of engine start. As we approach the final 10 minutes of the count, do want to thank the more than 5,000 of you who have joined in our live broadcast this afternoon. If you haven't already, if you could hit the like button, allow the YouTube algorithm to do its thing, allow more folks to find this live stream, that would be very much appreciated. And of course, you can always join in the chat and the conversation about this mission by using the YouTube Super Chat feature. I'll have to answer any questions that may be out there at this time. Before we get too much further, for those who have joined more recently, want to back up a little bit and talk about the trajectory of this particular mission, for those who may have missed it the first time around. Falcon 9 launching from SpaceX's workhorse pad, Slick 40 over at Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. It'll be flying in an easterly trajectory out over the Atlantic Ocean. Following stage separation, the first stage, tail number 1076, will land on one of SpaceX's 3 drone ships. The one on deck tonight is A Shortfall of Gravitas. The upper stage will continue on with the O3b mPOWER satellites. The fairing halves will jettison just a bit downrange as well. If you'd like to see what the recovery process looks like, this is an image from a recent Starlink launch when they were recovering a pair of payload fairing halves out of the Atlantic Ocean. This first one that you see here closest to the screen, that's being lifted out of the water, having gone for its 13th flight. SpaceX also working to reuse and recover its fairing halves alongside its first stage boosters. Now T-minus 8 minutes, 47 seconds and counting. Now T-minus 7 minutes, 32 seconds and counting. Before we start with the engine chill sequence, let's run through the history of this particular booster. Tail number 1076, going for its 9th flight today. Let's see how we got here. Started back on November 26, 2022 with a launch from Space Launch Complex 39A here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. That was Commercial Resupply Services Mission, or CRS-26. Sent a cargo Dragon spacecraft up to the International Space Station with more than 7,600 pounds of cargo and science in tow. Second launch came on January 10th of this year. That was the OneWeb Flight 16 mission, the second of 3 dedicated launches of the OneWeb satellites for its internet constellation. Of course, after Russia invaded Ukraine, OneWeb lost the Soyuz rocket as a launch vehicle. It then bought 3 flights from SpaceX and 2 from India to launch its remaining constellation. The third flight came on February 27th when it launched the first batch of Starlink V2 mini satellites. That was the 6-1 mission. It was followed up on April 7th when this booster supported the Intelsat 40E satellite launch. This communications satellite also important because it included a NASA-hosted payload called the Tropospheric Emissions Monitoring of Pollution, or TEMPO instrument. It's a UV visible spectrometer that monitors air pollutants hourly across North America. Earlier this year, last couple of months, the first images from TEMPO were published, showing some nitrogen dioxide from areas as small as 4 square miles. It can also be used to measure other pollutants during the daytime like ozone, sulfur dioxide, and formaldehyde, and at night it can measure light pollution. Launches 5 through 8 were all Starlink missions. Those were Starlink's 6-3 on May 19th, Starlink 6-6 on July 24th, Starlink 6-14 on September 9th, and most recently, Starlink 6-21 on October 5th. Point of note, the turnaround time between missions 7 and 8 marked the 4th fastest turnaround time for a Falcon booster at just 26 days. Now T-minus 5 minutes, 4 seconds and counting on this particular flight. Coming up in less than 30 seconds, the clamps around the Falcon 9 rocket will open up as the Strongback Retract sequence is about to begin. You see the Strongback Retract begin as those clamp arms are opening up. Now less than 4 minutes to lift off. And you can see there's still quite a bit of cloud cover around the launch pads out there, but SpaceX hoping to find enough of an opening that they're able to lift off in about 3.5 minutes from now. Now T-minus 3 minutes and counting. The rocket's autonomous destruct system will be armed shortly. Liquid oxygen topping is wrapping up soon. Coming, and we hear the call out that stage 1 LOX loading is complete. The last big outstanding item is finishing up fueling with the second stage liquid oxygen loading. That'll wrap up about T-minus 1 minute 30 seconds. Just as a point of note, you're seeing a bit of a discrepancy between our countdown clock and the one you see at the bottom of your screen. Reason for that is ours is in real time and SpaceX on a slight delay. Did hear from SpaceX that to hear call out stage 2 LOX loading is complete, and the 45th Weather Squadron says that they're not seeing any limiting weather items, so it seems like while the clouds are still hanging around, they should be able to launch through them, which is good news. T-minus 1 minute, 15 seconds. We're approaching the final minute of the count. At the T-minus 1 minute point, the flight computers will take control. Stages 1 and 2 will pressurize for flight. The onboard computer will perform checks to the first stage engine steering system. Now less than a minute to go.
Vehicles in startup.
And there we go, Falcon 9.
Coming up in the next several seconds, we should hear the launch director give their go for launch.
Launch director on countdown. Go for launch.
And we heard that go for launch call out. Now less than 30 seconds for liftoff. Now 20 seconds out. 15 seconds. And here we go. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Ignition. And liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket supporting SES O3b mPOWER 5 and 6 satellite mission. Falcon 9 climbing quickly into the clouds. Unfortunately, our Adam Bernstein still able to track it a little bit through the clouds. I know he's doing his best. It's not the most ideal for tracking a rocket launch, but certainly doing his best out there. Now 30 seconds into flight. See on board the Falcon 9 rocket as the vehicle climbs through the clouds. And our Adam's got it back in view. Now T plus 50 seconds into flight. Merlin engines will be throttling down as the vehicle approaches max Q, the point of greatest aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle. You see some views there from SpaceX tracking camera. Now T plus 1 minute, 24 seconds into flight. You hear the call out for max Q. Now minute 30 seconds into flight. About a minute left on the first stage burn. Heading towards MVAC chill down. And it'll be a little hard to see through the clouds, but we're coming up on main engine cutoff. Now 2 minutes into flight. MECO coming up at T plus 2 minutes, 27 seconds. Now about 5 seconds from main engine cutoff. Of course, we're seeing the SpaceX delayed view, so keep an eye on the count up clock there at the bottom of your screen. That's the time to watch now at this point, the onboard views. There you see MECO on your screen. That'll be followed quickly by stage separation, and then second stage start. And you can see the booster falling away from the second stage as the Merlin vacuum engine ignites. Those hypersonic grid fins deploying as the first stage prepares to land on the drone ship out in the Atlantic Ocean. Drone ship A Shortfall of Gravitas. T plus 3 minutes, 25 seconds into flight in real time, 3:17 on the SpaceX views. Next milestone coming up is at T plus 6 minutes, 34 seconds when the first stage entry burn will begin.
Both vehicles are following
You see the
nominal
payload
trajectories.
fairings falling away. Now T plus 4 minutes, 43 seconds and counting in real time. A little over 4.5 minutes on the SpaceX timeline. We're less than 2 minutes away from the start of the entry burn. Burn will last about 23 seconds in total. On the right-hand side of your screen, the MVAC engine in its first of 3 burns for today. This first burn will last until T plus 7 minutes, 51 seconds. The first stage now decreasing in altitude as it prepares for the start of that entry burn. When you'll see that speedometer on the bottom left-hand side of your screen start to drop down much more rapidly. Coming up now, less than 30 seconds till the start of the entry burn. Now T plus 6 minutes, 20 seconds into flight. The first stage entry burn again starting at T plus 6 minutes, 34 seconds. So less than 10 seconds in real time, but visually the time you're looking for.
Stage 1 entry burn startup.
We see at the bottom of your screen. Here you see the entry burn beginning. Falcon 9 first stage booster hitting the brakes as it begins to make its way back down towards the drone ship out in the Atlantic, A Shortfall of Gravitas. Next milestone coming up following the end of the entry burn, of course, is at T plus 7 minutes, 51 seconds when the second stage Merlin vacuum engine will cease firing. SECO 1. Second stage engine cut off, I should say. Now less than 10 seconds until SECO 1. That'll be followed at T plus 8 minutes, 19 seconds for first stage landing burn start. First stage is now transonic, meaning it's traveling below the speed of sound. And there you see SECO on the right-hand side of your screen. Seeing some views from the first stage as it cruises down towards
There we go.
the drone ship. And there you see the landing bird begin, the drone ship coming into view. Some great daytime views of drone ship landing. And there you see touchdown of the Falcon 9 first stage booster 1076. This was the 9th launch and landing of this booster. Now T plus 9 minutes, 16 seconds and counting. You see the payload adapter that is blocking the views of the satellites themselves. SpaceX says that is the reason why they are not continuing on with their views and streaming of the telemetry information. So they will be wrapping up views, we believe, shortly. And with that, yes, SpaceX has peeled away from onboard camera views, and so we will provide updates as we learn them as far as the deployment of the 2 satellites for Luxembourg company SES. With a successful liftoff and the mission now in the rearview mirror, let's go back over to the mission stats, let you know where things ended up for SpaceX. Again, this was the 79th launch of this booster, or excuse me, the 9th launch of this booster, tail number B1076. This was the 273rd Falcon 9 launch to date, the 79th Falcon 9 launch of 2023, the 217th Falcon booster reflight, the 83rd SpaceX orbital launch of 2023. This was the 92nd Falcon 9 launch in the last 365 days, the 154th SpaceX orbital launch from Pad 40, the 209th overall launch from Pad 40, and the 63rd orbital launch from Florida in 2023. Taking a broader look at the landscape of launches for SpaceX over the last decade plus. Again, this was their 83rd orbital launch of 2023. You can see just the massive upward trajectory of their number of launches over the years. Of course, potentially a big one coming up, possibly, again, I must stress the word possibly here, at the end of this week with what SpaceX hopes to be the second integrated flight test of their Starship vehicle, with the giant asterisks, or however much salt you want to add to this equation, being that the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service has not wrapped up their assessment of the water deluge system that was added in order to protect the orbital launch mount there. You see there at the center of your screen. These views from Starbase brought to us by our friends at Lab Padre. You can see, while it's cloudy here, it's not nearly as dismal a weather outlook as it is there in Boca Chica Beach in South Texas, where the forecast has rain today, rain tomorrow, and looks like quite blustery on Tuesday. So for those of you who have travel plans, hoping to see Starship launch in person, just sure to keep an eye out on the weather, as it may impact your flight or drive plans. Ship 25 destacked from Booster 25 or Booster 9 yesterday. So while SpaceX is optimistic that they can launch the fully integrated vehicle at the end of this week, prepared to bring you live launch coverage alongside Lab Padre coming up later this week, or whenever this mission does in fact launch. We will be there on the ground and bring it live to you, as well as, of course, coverage leading up to the launch itself. So poised to be a very busy week, all things being equal. So be sure to keep an eye on our social media feeds, principally Spaceflight Now's, as well as that of Adam and myself, as we will be hitting the road, heading out to Starbase to bring you the sights and sounds from the second launch of Starship, something that is very much anticipated by a lot of folks. SpaceX, obviously, NASA being another key watcher of this mission, as they need Starship for their human landing system on the Artemis 3 and 4 mission. Do want to quickly thank super chat that came in just a moment ago from Janine De La Sera, one of our channel members, with a $2 super chat donation. Thank you so much, Janine. Really appreciate that. It'll help support trips like the one we're doing out to Starbase to bring you on the ground coverage, as well as being able to do these live streams for you. So thank you so much for the support. And with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap things up. T plus 16 minutes, 55 seconds and counting into this flight. Again, as far as the overall timeline of this mission, the satellite deployment is not for about an hour and 45 minutes is when the first satellite will be deployed at T plus 2 hours and 18 minutes, followed by the second O3b mPOWER satellite at T plus 2 hours, 7 minutes and 18 seconds. Clouds made it tricky to track this one, but want to thank our friend Pete Carsons for doing what he can to help us out today, as well as, of course, our own Adam Bernstein, able to find some opportunities to catch things through the clouds, tricky though it may have been. Be sure to follow him and Michael Kane for launch photography from this mission. These are their handles on X. If you're not already following them, be sure to do so to see photos from this and other missions coming up. Want to thank all of you who have taken some time on your Sunday, heading into another busy week, I'm sure, for a lot of you out there. So I really appreciate you spending a part of your day with us. And for Lori Jones-Wilson for a $2 super chat, really appreciate the support, Lori. And that'll do it for us today, folks. Our thanks, as always, to Stephen Young for keeping this ship afloat and running the technical aspects of the show, as always. I'm Will Robinson-Smith for Spaceflight Now. Be good to yourself, be good to others, and we will see you next time.